The neon haze of the space station bar flickered intermittently, casting erratic shadows across the room. Caleb Harrison sat alone at the bar, his rugged, battle-scarred face partially obscured by the dim light. He nursed a luminescent drink, his eyes reflecting a lifetime of battles and losses. The low hum of alien conversations filled the air, a cacophony of languages and dialects. Without warning, an Andorian named Korvac approached, his antennae twitching with barely concealed disdain. "You humans think you're invincible," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Caleb didn't look up, his grip tightening around his glass. "Careful," he murmured, a hint of menace in his tone. "You don't know what you're starting." Korvac laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "I've heard the stories, but I think they're just that, stories." In an instant, Caleb moved. His fist connected with Korvac's skull, the sickening crack echoing through the bar. Blue blood splattered across the metal counter, and Korvac's antennae twitched violently. "Please, don't provoke the humans," Caleb growled, releasing his grip. Korvac slumped into the seat opposite Caleb, his neon drink forgotten, eyes wide with primal fear. Caleb took a long swig from his drink, the dim light casting harsh shadows across his face. "I've seen things, kid. Things that would make your blue skin crawl." Korvac, despite his fear, leaned forward, curiosity overriding his terror. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. A dark chuckle escaped Caleb's lips. "When the Andorians invaded Earth, they thought it would be easy pickings. Just another primitive race to conquer. But we showed them the depths of human wrath." Caleb's mind drifted back to the war. He began recounting the invasion, his voice low and intense. "They had the tech, the numbers, the firepower. But we had something they couldn't understand, a fierce, unbreakable determination to protect our home, our families, our existence." He paused, his eyes locking onto Korvac's. "You want to know why you should never provoke the humans? Because when push comes to shove, when our backs are against the wall, that's when we shine. That's when we tap into a savage, indomitable spirit that refuses to yield." Caleb's voice dropped to a whisper, each word weighted with the toll of a war that nearly consumed two species. "The Andorians learned that lesson the hard way. And if the rest of the galaxy has any sense, they'll learn from your people's mistake. Because if they don't, if they dare to threaten our world again, we will unleash a fury unlike any the universe has ever seen." Korvac sat in stunned silence, his fear replaced by a grim understanding. Caleb continued, his voice steady but filled with the echoes of past horrors. "The Andorians weren't satisfied with just invading. They wanted to break us, make an example out of Earth. Millions died in an instant as their ships rained hellfire from above. But all they did was awaken a sleeping giant." He leaned forward, his eyes burning with fierce intensity. "Humanity united like never before. Every man, woman, and child ready to lay down their lives to protect our home. We adapted, improvised, and used every dirty trick in the book." Caleb described humanity's unconventional strategies, his eyes glinting with fierce pride. "We hacked their drones, turning them against their own troops. We lured their soldiers into traps using holograms and decoys. We even weaponized our own planet using Earth's natural defenses against them." He took another swig of his drink, savoring the memory. "I remember one battle in the ruins of what used to be Sydney. The Andorians had us pinned down, outnumbered and outgunned. But we had a secret weapon, the drop bears." Korvac's antennae twitched in confusion. "Drop bears? What are those?" Caleb grinned, a feral expression that sent shivers down Korvac's spine. "They're a species of carnivorous koala, native to Australia. They drop down from trees onto their prey, tearing them apart with razor-sharp claws and venomous fangs. We lured the Andorians into a trap, right into the heart of drop bear territory. It was a massacre. The bears dropped from the trees, latching onto the Andorians' faces and necks. Blue blood sprayed everywhere as the soldiers screamed and fired wildly." Caleb chuckled darkly. "The Andorians never saw it coming. They thought they knew everything about Earth's wildlife, but they were wrong. We used every weapon at our disposal, even the ones they didn't know existed." Korvac hung on to every word, his fear mingling with a newfound respect. Caleb's tale painted a picture of a species that refused to be conquered, that fought with a tenacity and ingenuity that no invader could match. The Andorians weren't just trying to conquer us, Caleb continued. They wanted to break our spirit. But all they did was forge it into something unbreakable. We fought with everything we had, and in the end, we prevailed. But the cost was high. Too high. He looked up, his eyes meeting Korvac's with a piercing gaze. Remember this, Andorian. Tell your people, if you push us, we'll push back harder than you can imagine. And next time, we won't stop until your entire species is nothing but a memory. Caleb stood, tossing a handful of credits onto the table. Consider this a warning from one soldier to another. Don't mess with the humans. The dimly lit bar hummed with low conversations, but Korvac's focus remained on Caleb. The human's intense gaze bore into him as he recounted humanity's fight for survival. Caleb leaned back, his eyes clouding as memories resurfaced. When the Andorians first attacked, we were unprepared, Caleb began, his voice a mixture of anger and sorrow. They hit us with everything they had. Cities fell. Millions died. But instead of breaking us, they united us. Images of burning cities and desperate battles filled Korvac's mind as Caleb continued. I was in Sydney when they made their big push. They thought they had us cornered, outnumbered, outgunned. But we had something they didn't, our planet itself. Caleb's eyes gleamed with a fierce pride. We turned our own world into a weapon. In the dense forests and urban ruins, we became shadows, striking from the dark and disappearing before they could react. They had their tech, their ships, but we had Earth. Korvac leaned in, unable to hide his curiosity. What do you mean by using your planet as a weapon? A grim smile spread across Caleb's face. Ever heard of drop bears? The Andorian's antennae twitched in confusion. Drop bears? Yeah, Caleb chuckled darkly. Carnivorous koalas. They drop from trees onto their prey, tearing them apart with claws and venomous fangs. We lured the Andorians into their territory. They never saw it coming. The screams, the chaos, it was brutal. Korvac shuddered at the thought. But that was just the beginning, Caleb continued. We hacked their drones, turned their own tech against them. Holograms, decoys, anything to gain an advantage. We used guerrilla tactics, ambushes, traps. We adapted faster than they could anticipate. The human's voice grew harder, the weight of his experiences palpable. We fought not just for survival, but for every inch of our home. Every alley, every building became a battleground. And we fought with a ferocity they couldn't match. Caleb's expression darkened as he recounted a particular battle. In the ruins of Sydney, we were pinned down. The Andorians had us surrounded. But we had a secret weapon. Not just the drop bears, but something even more cunning. We rigged the buildings with traps, turning the city into a deadly maze. His voice dropped to a whisper. We led them into a trap. As they advanced, we triggered the charges, collapsing buildings and cutting off their escape. The debris crushed their units, and those who survived were easy pickings for our snipers. Korvac's eyes widened as he absorbed the story. How did you manage to coordinate all of this? Caleb's gaze was distant, lost in the memories. It wasn't easy. We had to be quick, smarter than them. Communication was key. We used old radio frequencies, encrypted channels they couldn't trace. And we had people, brilliant minds, who devised these tactics. It was a collective effort. The Andorian couldn't help but feel a growing respect for the human race. So, it was your ingenuity that turned the tide? Ingenuity, desperation, and sheer willpower, Caleb replied. We refused to bow down. Each time they thought they had us beaten, we came back stronger. They underestimated our resilience. Caleb took a deep breath, his face softening slightly. But the cost was high. The loss of life, the destruction, it was unimaginable. Families torn apart, cities reduced to rubble. Yet, amidst the chaos, we found unity. People from all walks of life came together, driven by a single purpose. Korvac's voice was barely a whisper. To survive. To protect what was ours, Caleb corrected. To show them that humanity isn't just a species to conquer. We are a force to be reckoned with. A silence settled between them, the weight of Caleb's words hanging in the air. Korvac struggled to find his voice. And the Andorians. What did they learn from this? Caleb's eyes hardened once more. They learned that humanity doesn't give up, that we fight with everything we have, using every resource at our disposal. They learned that provoking us brings consequences they couldn't foresee. The Andorian nodded slowly, understanding dawning on him. So, it wasn't just about technology or numbers. It was about spirit. Exactly, Caleb affirmed. They had superior firepower, but we had superior tactics. They wanted to break us, but instead, they strengthened our resolve. Korvac glanced around the bar, seeing the humans in a new light. They weren't just another species, they were survivors, warriors with a depth of resilience and ingenuity that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. As Caleb finished his tale, he leaned back, his eyes meeting Korvac's with a final, piercing gaze. Remember this, if you push us, we push back. And when we do, it's with a force that comes from the very core of our existence. The Andorian swallowed hard, the gravity of Caleb's words sinking in. He had witnessed the ferocity of humans firsthand, and now he understood the warning was not just a threat but a promise. Caleb's voice, though quieter, carried the weight of his experience. We may have lost much, but we gained something invaluable, an unbreakable spirit. So, next time you think of challenging us, remember the drop bears and the ruins of Sydney? We fight not just with weapons, but with our very soul. Caleb leaned back, his eyes distant, as he continued his tale. They chose us for the Black Ops mission because we were the best, the most desperate, and the most determined. Our orders were clear: infiltrate, sabotage, and neutralize. In the dim light of the resistance bunker, Caleb and his team suited up. The room buzzed with a mix of anticipation and dread. Each member of the team had a different skill set, honed by the brutal necessities of war. There was Jane, the tech genius, Lucas, the silent scout, and Marcus, the demolition expert. Caleb, their leader, carried the weight of their lives on his shoulders. "Everyone ready?" Caleb asked, his voice steady despite the anxiety gnawing at his gut. The team nodded, eyes hard with determination. They boarded a sleek, modified transport ship equipped with stolen Andorian cloaking devices. As the ship slipped into space, the view of Earth receded, leaving behind the battered yet defiant home they fought for. Caleb's mind replayed the mission briefing: infiltrate an Andorian command ship, plant charges at critical points, and unleash a virus to cripple their fleet. "We're approaching the target," Jane announced, her fingers dancing over the controls. The cloaking device hummed, enveloping them in an invisible shroud. The Andorian command ship loomed ahead, a behemoth of alien engineering. Its sleek, menacing design contrasted sharply with the rough and ready human vessel. As they docked silently, the team moved with practiced precision. Caleb led the way, his senses heightened, every nerve on edge. "Remember, no heroics," Caleb whispered. "Stick to the plan." Inside the command ship, the corridors were eerily silent, lit by an unnatural blue glow. The team split up, each member assigned to a different section. Caleb and Jane headed for the engine room, while Lucas and Marcus targeted life support and weapons control. Jane worked quickly, her deft hands connecting the virus uplink to the Andorian system. "This should spread like wildfire," she murmured, a grim smile on her lips. Caleb placed charges on the main reactor, setting the timers. "We need to move, now." As they navigated back towards the rendezvous point, an unexpected sound froze them in their tracks. Footsteps heavy, armored. An Andorian patrol. Caleb signaled Jane to hide, his hand inching towards his plasma pistol. The patrol passed, oblivious to the human intruders. Caleb exhaled slowly, motioning for Jane to follow. They rejoined Lucas and Marcus at the docking bay, each team member showing signs of their own close calls. "The charges are set. Virus uploaded," Lucas reported, his voice a low whisper. "Good. Let's get out of here," Caleb ordered. Just as they were about to board their ship, an alarm blared. Red lights flashed, and the sound of running feet echoed down the corridor. "We've been made," Marcus shouted. Caleb cursed under his breath. "Go, go, go!" They dashed onto the ship, Jane hitting the controls to detach and cloak them. Plasma fire erupted behind them, the air sizzling with the intensity of the attack. Caleb returned fire, his shots precise, buying them precious seconds. The ship lurched free, cloaking device engaging just in time. They sped away, leaving the Andorian command ship in chaos. Through the viewport, they saw explosions rip through the alien vessel as the charges detonated, followed by the flicker of systems failing due to the virus. "We did it," Jane said, her voice a mix of disbelief and triumph. Caleb nodded, his expression grim. One battle won. But the war's far from over. Back on Earth, their return was met with subdued cheers and grateful nods. The mission had been a success, a critical blow to the Andorian fleet. Yet, as Caleb disembarked, he felt the weight of every life lost, every friend who wouldn't be coming home. A debriefing with the command followed. General Thompson, a stern figure with piercing eyes, commended them. "You've given us a fighting chance, Caleb. The Andorians are in disarray." Caleb met the general's gaze. "At what cost, sir? We're running on fumes. Every victory feels like a Pyrrhic one." Thompson's expression softened slightly. "We fight because we must, because giving up isn't an option." Later, alone in his quarters, Caleb looked at a photo of his sister, her smiling face a stark contrast to the brutal reality they now faced. He remembered holding her as she died, her blood staining his hands. The memory fueled his resolve. As he lay on his bunk, exhaustion pulling him towards sleep, a message from Jane appeared on his comp. "Virus report, 90% of the Andorian fleet systems compromised. Temporary advantage secured." Caleb sighed, closing his eyes. It was a small victory, but a necessary one. They had shown the Andorians that humanity wouldn't bow, wouldn't break. "Please, don't provoke the humans," he whispered to the darkness, a silent vow to keep fighting, no matter the odds. Caleb Harrison leaned back in his chair, eyes unfocused as memories of the war surged to the forefront. The dim lighting of the bar did little to dispel the shadows of his past. Korvac, now more intrigued than fearful, leaned closer, antennae twitching with anticipation. "You want to know what drives us, Andorian?" Caleb's voice was rough, each word laden with the weight of countless battles. "It's not just about survival. It's about the people we lost along the way." Korvac nodded silently, captivated by the human's intensity. "I remember the day we lost Sydney. The Andorians bombarded the city relentlessly. Buildings crumbled, and the air was thick with smoke and ash. But even then, we didn't give up. We fought in the ruins, using every scrap of knowledge and every ounce of determination we had." He took a deep breath, the memories still fresh. "My unit was tasked with holding the eastern quadrant. We were outnumbered, outgunned, but we had to buy time for the evacuation. It was chaos. Plasma bolts flying, explosions everywhere. My best friend, James, was beside me. We grew up together, joined the resistance together." Caleb's eyes glistened with unshed tears. James was always the optimist. Even in the darkest times, he'd find something to laugh about. But that day, he took a hit meant for me. I watched him fall, his life bleeding out onto the scorched earth. He paused, the weight of the loss pressing down on him. I held him in my arms, tried to stop the bleeding, but it was no use. His last words, he told me to keep fighting, to protect what we had left. And that's what I did. We held the line, and we saved those civilians, but the cost was high." Korvac shifted uncomfortably, the raw emotion in Caleb's voice cutting through the bravado he had shown earlier. "But it wasn't just James," Caleb continued, his voice a mere whisper now. "The war took my sister too. Emma was a medic, always putting others before herself. She was on the front lines, treating the wounded when an Andorian strike hit our camp. I found her buried under the rubble, barely alive. I held her hand as she took her last breath, her eyes filled with pain and love. She made me promise to keep fighting, to make sure their sacrifices weren't in vain." Caleb clenched his fists, the pain of those memories fueling his resolve. "That's what you need to understand, Korvac. We don't fight because we enjoy it or because we want to conquer. We fight because we have to, Because if we don't, everything we've lost, everyone we've loved, would be for nothing. He leaned forward, his gaze piercing. The Andorian invasion didn't break us. It forged us into something stronger. We learned to unite, to adapt, to fight back with a fierceness you can't begin to comprehend. And it's not just about revenge. It's about ensuring a future where our children can live without fear. Korvac's antennae twitched as he absorbed Caleb's words. I didn't realize the depth of your loss, the strength it must take to keep going. Caleb nodded, his expression softening slightly. It's not easy. Every day is a battle, not just against external threats, but against the darkness inside. But we carry on because we must, because we owe it to those who can't. And that's why, if you provoke us, you'll face not just soldiers but a united force driven by love, loss, and an unbreakable spirit. He sat back, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. Humanity has paid a heavy price, but we stand ready to defend our home, our people, with everything we've got. And that's something no amount of technology or firepower can match. Korvac looked at Caleb, a newfound respect in his eyes. I see now why the Andorians failed. They underestimated not your weapons, but your will. Caleb nodded slowly. Exactly. So, take this message back to your leaders. Tell them that humanity is not to be trifled with. We are not just survivors. We are warriors, forged in the fires of adversity, and we will defend what is ours with every fiber of our being. The Andorian's gaze shifted to the floor, the weight of Caleb's words settling over him like a heavy cloak. I will carry your message, he said quietly, and I will remember. Caleb watched as Korvac stood up, the earlier hostility replaced by a solemn understanding. As the Andorian walked away, Caleb took a moment to collect himself. The past still haunted him, but sharing his story had eased some of the burden. He looked around the bar, now quiet, and realized that his tale had reached more ears than just Korvac's. Caleb stepped out of the bar into the dimly lit corridor, the weight of the past still heavy on his shoulders. The metallic grating beneath his boots echoed with each step, but his solitude was short-lived. Emerging from the shadows, a group of Andorian thugs blocked his path, their eyes glinting with malevolent intent. The leader, a battle-scarred Andorian with a cybernetic eye, sneered at Caleb. Well, if it isn't Caleb Harrison, the hero of the human resistance, trying to enjoy his retirement in peace. Caleb's hand instinctively drifted toward the plasma pistol holstered at his hip. He kept his gaze steady. I'm not looking for trouble. Just a quiet drink. The Andorian leader let out a harsh, grating laugh. Peace? There can be no peace between our species, human, not after what you did to us. He gestured to his cybernetic eye, the metal glinting in the low light. I lost this in the war, fighting against your kind. Now, I'm going to take something from you in return. Without warning, the thugs drew their weapons, plasma rifles, and crackling electro whips. Caleb's reflexes kicked in, and his pistol was in his hand in an instant. He fired 2 quick shots, taking down 2 of the thugs before they could react. The remaining Andorians spread out, trying to flank him. A whip lashed out, snaring Caleb's wrist and sending his pistol clattering to the floor. A plasma bolt hissed past his head, grazing his shoulder and burning through his jacket. Gritting his teeth against the pain, Caleb charged forward, closing the distance between himself and the Andorian leader in a heartbeat. They crashed to the ground, grappling and trading blows. Caleb's genetically enhanced strength matched against the Andorian's cybernetic augmentations created a brutal, bloody fight. Despite the leader's mechanical advantages, Caleb's experience and sheer determination gave him the edge. With a final, forceful twist, he broke free of the whip and slammed his fist into the Andorian's jaw, sending him sprawling. Caleb didn't hesitate. He grabbed the leader by the throat, lifting him off the ground with a grim determination. This is what happens when you provoke the humans, Caleb growled, his voice low and menacing. We fight back, and we don't stop until the job is done. He squeezed harder, watching the life drain from the Andorian's eyes. The thugs, seeing their leader defeated, either fled or lay incapacitated, their blue blood mingling with the spilled drinks and shattered glass that littered the floor. Breathing heavily, Caleb surveyed the carnage with a soldier's eye. The Andorian thugs lay dead or dying, a testament to the ferocity of his response. The corridor fell silent, the clamor of the battle replaced by the soft hum of the station's systems. Korvac, who had followed the commotion, stood frozen at the edge of the scene, his antennae quivering with fear and awe. I didn't realize humans could be so ruthless, he stammered. Caleb turned, his expression softening slightly. Ruthless. We do what we have to do to survive, he said, his voice rough with emotion. We didn't want this war, but when it came to our doorstep, we fought with everything we had. Korvac took a hesitant step forward, his eyes wide with a newfound respect. Your determination. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. Why? Because we have something worth fighting for, Caleb replied, his gaze distant as he remembered the countless sacrifices made during the war. Our homes, our families, our very existence. That's what drives us. The sound of approaching footsteps broke the silence. Human reinforcements arrived, securing the area and tending to the wounded. One of the soldiers, a young woman with a determined look in her eyes, approached Caleb. Are you all right, sir? She asked, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Caleb nodded, a grim smile playing at the corner of his mouth. I'm fine. Just another day, huh? She smiled back, but it didn't reach her eyes. Yes, sir. We've got this under control now. As the reinforcements cleared the area, Caleb turned to Korvac. Remember this, he said, his voice firm. Tell your people. If you provoke us, if you push us, we'll push back harder than you can imagine. Korvac nodded, his antennae still trembling. I will. I promise. Caleb watched as Korvac hurried away, the weight of the warning clear in his hurried steps. Turning back to the corridor, Caleb took a deep breath. The fight was over, for now. But the battle for survival, for peace, was far from finished. As he walked away, the memories of the past and the promises of the future intertwined, a constant reminder of the price of freedom. Caleb knew one thing for certain: humanity would endure. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.